Good morning, everybody. It looks like people are filling in. So we'll give it about 30 seconds or so before kicking off this Thursday version of Drop Into Discovery. Looks like more people are coming in. And seems as though we've paused for the time being. So without further ado, here we go. Good morning, everybody. I'm Michael, School Programs Coordinator at the Wild Center, coming to you from my home as we practice social distancing. And today, we've got a really fun science experiment and challenge for you all, focused again on fishes. So we'll be looking up close at one of my favorite species of Adirondack fish. If you're new to Zoom or haven't attended the last episode of Drop Into Digital Learning, you'll notice there's some icons at the bottom of your screen and the top of your screen. So at the top of your screen, I'm going to have you select speaker view. So you're just seeing me. And then down at the bottom, you'll notice that there's an option for question and answer. That is what we'll be using for you all to submit questions throughout the program. So I have a couple colleagues that will be answering maybe some more logistical questions as we go. And then I'll hopefully be able to pause off and on throughout today's program to answer your questions in real time. And then I'll have some time at the end to stick around and for you all to stick around if you're interested to answer maybe some more in-depth questions and talk a little bit about what we have in store in the coming weeks. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get moving. Great. So today's edition of Digital Drop-In at the Wild Center is all about fish dissection. So we'll be looking up close at one of, again, my favorite species of fish, the yellow perch, talking a little bit about how it survives in the Adirondacks and throughout North America. And then we'll take a look inside to learn a little bit more about it. So my question to you all, and I'll have you reflect on it independently, or maybe if you're with family, reflect with them. Why would a scientist do a dissection? What purpose does it serve? What can we learn further by doing a dissection? So I'll give you about 10-15 seconds. Think about it. Maybe when you're ready to go, click the little raise hand icon, and I can see we're ready to go to get answers here. Awesome. So dissections are incredibly interesting, and they allow us to do many things. They allow us to learn more about the animal up close. They allow us to learn about its anatomy, so different parts of its body, both exterior and internal parts of its body we can learn about through dissection, so how those parts work together for organ systems and so on. And we can learn how it fits into the food web. By looking at the contents of its stomach or its digestive system, we can figure out a little bit more about what animals it's eating or plants it's eating and where, again, it fits into food systems, whether that's in the Adirondacks or elsewhere. So our fish today is going to be a yellow perch. They're quite remarkable fish and quite distinct looking fish. I remember fishing when I was really, really young. I think I must have been 5 years old or maybe a little bit older, traveling up to the Adirondacks from down in the Finger Lakes and catching a yellow perch. And one of the key characteristics that we can see in this image and that we'll see with my fish that we'll dissect are those really vivid, distinct coloration on its fins. Its lower fins tend to have like an orange coloration. And then its back, you can see the bars, so the dark green and light green. So switching over to an image here of the perch so you can see it from the side. And you get a little bit of a better idea of the coloration of its lower fins here being a little bit more orange, a little yellow underbelly, and then the camouflage pattern up on its back. So are we ready to go and check out this fish digitally in person, I suppose? Awesome. So I'm going to stop sharing and switch screens and get ready to go for the demo here. So you should see what looks like a cafeteria tray. That will be the location of our dissection. So bear with me just for a second as I switch on over to that screen. As we go, remember, if you do have questions, you're welcome to throw those into the question and answer, the Q&A section of Zoom here, and we'll revisit those as we go throughout the program. So this here is our yellow perch that we'll be looking at today. So you can see that it does have those bands, these camouflage bands on its back, which are a distinguishing factor for yellow perch. And then if we look down at its fins here, its pelvic fins here, and then the anal fin down at the bottom here are both nice and orange in color. So what I like to do when doing a dissection is to get an idea of the external anatomy of the fish first, the various body parts, and how this fish would be able to survive in the habitat and the aquatic ecosystems here in the Adirondacks. So for moving around, fish have a lot at their disposal. They have multiple sets of fins depending on the species that allow them to move forward. So they use the muscles of their fins, typically with their tail fin or their caudal fin here, to power them through the water. And then the other fins all help them steer so they don't end up like a football spinning throughout the water as they go. What I'd like to do is, let's go over the fins. There's some really, really great names for these fins. I'm gonna pop the camera up just a little bit so you can see it a little bit better here. Bounce that out there. So now we got the whole picture here. So fish, for the most part, can have two paired fins. The side ones here are the ones that you may think about if you think about, say, the movie Finding Nemo. These are pectoral fins. So that's a paired fin. There's one on this side. There's one on the other side here. There are pelvic fins. The other set of paired fins on many fish. These are ones at the bottom of its body. So there's one on either side there. For more derived, so more recently evolved species of fish, the pelvic and pectoral fins tend to be towards the front of the fish. And for more ancestral fishes, these pelvic fins sometimes are towards the back of the fish. If you think about fish that we have at the Wild Center, sturgeon are a really great example of a fish that have pectoral fins right up at the front, pelvic fins way at the back here. So those are our paired fins for our fish. And then we have some more fins. We mentioned the caudal fin, that's the tail fin here, that our fish will use to power itself through the water. They have, in this case, a distinguishing factor for perch is that they actually have two dorsal fins, two of these top fins. So dorsal fins tend to be one of the fins that we find with something called bony spines or soft rays. So the soft rays are what we saw with the pectoral fin here. It's really soft and flexible, but doesn't have spines that would possibly deter another animal from taking a bite out of it and it becoming the prey of another species of fish or bird or possibly a mammal that lives by the water. So with our perch here, the first dorsal fin is all bony rays or bony spines. So these are sharp spines that it can put its fin up not only to look bigger, but then to dissuade or discourage other animals from taking a bite out of it since they're nice and sharp. This second dorsal fin is mostly those soft rays. So these are flexible. And then there, I believe, can't really get a handle on it. But the first one here or so is a spine. There may be one or two more shorter spines at the front of this dorsal fin, while this one is predominantly made up of spines themselves. And then the last fin we've got is this bottom fin, also used, see if I can get my hand under it so you can see, also used for steering, and that's the anal fin of our fish. And all together, those fins, again, are great adaptations to help fish of any size and any type really navigate their environment. So as they're moving around their environment, we mentioned the color pattern on this perch. This perch is a color pattern, a camouflage pattern that we see on many different kinds of fish. So it has a disruptive pattern with these bands, so it can blend into maybe things like seaweed or grasses underwater, and and logs and such that it would be hanging out in to hide from other predators. But you'll also notice that if you look at the overall fish, there is a color pattern based on the top and the bottom. So the top of the fish is nice and dark. If I turn it like that, you see that dark back blends in with my tray, like the dark bottom and sediment of Adirondack ponds and streams, where you'd find our perch. And then the belly of the fish is nice and bright and light. And that would blend in with a surface as you have the sunlight coming through the top of the water. This fish is able to blend in and not really be seen from below as well. So that color pattern of that dark top, light belly is called counter shading. And that helps that fish blend in. So our fish is not being seen, hiding with its camouflage, moving around with its strong fins, and it's looking for some food. So it would use, let's think about what senses this fish would use for some food. So take like 10, 15 seconds, think about what you think this fish would be utilizing to help find its prey. It would be eating things like aquatic invertebrates, little insects that live in the water, crayfish, possibly smaller fish that are in the water. What could it be using to find that food? It could be feeling the movement of organisms with its lateral line. So this one is really hard to see. We'll see if I can get it up nice and close. There's a lateral line, which is a nerve and a sensing organ that stretches along the side of the fish, right along the back here. So that would tell it a little bit about what's around it, maybe if there's prey moving around, if it feels a small vibration, or predator, if it's a larger vibration around it. But then this perch would be using its eyes to really locate its food. Once it finds the food, fish have pretty remarkable mouths. If you think about our mouths, they just open like a lever. Fish, some of them, their mouth, let's see if I can get it. Some of them will open like a lever, and some of them, they have what's called a protrusible jaw. So that jaw can actually stick out. One, making their mouth a lot bigger, and two, being able to suck whatever in front of them right into their mouth. It makes a little pocket of negative pressure that's able to suck that food right in. So you can move it over here. Sorry, trying to locate my phone camera that we're using for broadcast here. So that mouth is nice and large, and it's able to scoop up any of those little invertebrates that it may find in its environment. Great. So our fish, again, is moving around. It's got its muscles and fins to help it move. It's got its camouflage to blend in. It's got its eye to find the food. But this fish needs something to allow it to move around. It needs something to metabolize so it can move around and survive. So we all use our lungs to breathe oxygen out of the air around us. Fish, for the most part, there are always exceptions to the rule with fish, it seems, with species like lungfish. But fish, for the most part, use something called gills to breathe underwater. So our first incision here on our fish is going to be to explore the gills and see what they look like up close. So the gills are going to be closer to this hand, closer to the head of the fish, and they're protected right under this flap here called the operculum. So I can open the operculum, and let's see if I can angle that a little bit. You can see in those kind of a pinkish colored feathery objects in there. Those are gill arches. So fish have multiple gill arches that all work to extract oxygen from the water. And then they're protected by this big bony covering called the operculum. Perch, like this one, tend to have a bony spine on their operculum too. This one looks not as strong, but this little spine here can help add extra protection to this hard covering over those gills, since they are quite sensitive and really essential to the fish and its survival. So I'm going to place the fish down, grab my pair of scissors, and we'll take a look at one of those gill arches up close. So again, it looks like we're getting some questions in. I will try to answer a question or two after we get the gill out, and then we'll move to the next stage of the fish dissection. So when cutting out a gill, you're going to open up the operculum, and then really you only have to make two cuts. One down at the base of the gill arch, and one at the top of the gill arch. And let's see if I can get that out of there. And do another cut. So again, one at the base. And one at the top. And we should be able to pull that out. Okay, so right here, we have a gill arch of a perch. You'll notice one side is soft and feathery. It looks kind of slimy right now. We'll take a look at it in the water and see how it changes. Since fish have evolved to extract oxygen out of water, gills are not effective in air and kind of just look like a little blob. But there are a bunch of little sections and surface area on this to extract that oxygen out of the water. The other side, this side down here, where I'm pointing at with my tweezers, you can almost see these like little more robust bumps coming off of it. And I'm off screen, apologize. There we go. So those bumps, in some species of fish, they'll actually have structures in their gills called gill rakers. And what those do is they can, as the fish breathes and water goes through its gills, little plankton will go through that as well. And these gill rakers can catch that plankton for them. And young perch will feed on some plankton, but once they get older, like this one, they'll mostly rely on catching food in their mouth and digesting it, as many other fish do. So I'm going to take this section of gills here and put it in the water, and we'll see how it changes. So I've got a cup of water. Get that nice and central there. And hopefully it will zoom in on it. But we've got the gills in the water, and it's a little blurry, I apologize, but it is a little bit more feathery. And that is just those gills working as they should and spreading out to provide that high surface area in the water. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna set that down. And we've got our fish actively moving through the water, catching food, providing oxygen to its body so it can process that food and survive. And now it's time to take a look at the internal anatomy of the fish. So I'm going to open the fish up from the bottom so we can look at the body cavity of it. And at this stage, what's really important if you were to be doing a dissection at home or in school, you never want to cut towards your hand. So I'm going to use the operculum here to hold on to it as I cut from down here at the base of the fish up through between these fins towards the chin. This will take a second, and then we'll take a look and see what we can find inside. Looks like there's some really great question and answer. What I'll do, I think just so I don't get my computer all fishy, if you can hold out just for a few minutes, I'll do this incision, and then maybe I can pull off one of my gloves so I can touch my computer and continue to touch the fish with the other hand. And we'll get to those questions for you all. But thank you for sticking with me. Okay. Also, when cutting the fish, we want to try to angle our scissors upwards. If they're angled down, I'm going to probably cut into the organs, and we won't really be able to see them in their complete form. So angle the scissors up. We'll start right down here, and here we go. Nice small cuts. Okay, so as we open up the fish here, it is super interesting and different from many of the ones I've been dissecting recently. We've got our internal organs here of our perch. What we'll do is I'll give you 30 seconds or so. Think about some different body structures that you would expect to see in an animal like a fish. So different organ systems. The challenge for today is going to be thinking about the dissection, reflecting on it a little bit. I've got a crossword that I posted on our website where you can think about the different vocabulary that I'm using and have some fun with it. but also thinking about comparative anatomy. So how the anatomy of a fish or an animal like a perch compares to that of humans, since we are an animal as well and have a lot of similar body functions. We're not adapted to living in the water, but we have to do many of the same processes as a perch would to survive. Okay, so this big dark thing is likely the digestive system of our fish. So this fish ate a lot before it was caught. Cool, so I'm gonna see if I can pull out some various organs here so we can see it a little bit better. Everybody looks like we can probably see it there if I move it right about there. So again, this dark portion, which I'll post a diagram as well if it's hard to see. Unfortunately, I can't label things on the go with this, but having a labeled diagram afterwards will help you connect to it a little bit more. So we've got the digestive system here. That's that dark portion. The light portion under here is most likely the gonads on this fish. So I think we have a male fish here. It's a little different. Female fish, the gonads would have a lot of eggs in them. So they would be, it almost looks textured, like a bunch of really, really tiny little circles in it. This one is a little bit more of a matte color. So I would believe that this is a male perch here. It's hard to tell with the digestive system here what is in it. It looks really broken down. So it's harder to tell the exact food source for this perch. But again, they'd be eating things like crustaceans, little invertebrates, bugs and such, insects and such that live in the water. I'm gonna try to cut this out so we can see more so into the perch here. Okay. Again, these whitish soft parts here are likely the gonads of the fish. I'm gonna pull those out so we can see in towards the bottom. So those are the gonads there next to our gill from earlier. Digestive system is this portion here. So that would be the intestines really. So fish tend to have a stomach like we do, intestines like we do, but then there's a different portion between the stomach and the intestines and sometimes taking over the place of the intestines called the pyloric cetum. And those are essentially, it's like a maze for the food. Really similar process to intestines that would, and again, that would be up over here, that would slow that food down and allow the fish to absorb more of those nutrients from it as it goes throughout its life. So let's see if this is easier. Maybe if I hold it up like this. So we've got the digestive system here. Right at the front here, there's another organ that is that like shiny-ish, it's a little bit shiny, but also a little bit matte. I know that's not the best description. But this portion here is likely the liver of this fish. With cartilaginous fish like sharks and stingrays, their liver is actually taking the place of a swim bladder and allowing them to stay nice and buoyant. But for fish like this one, the bony fish like the perch, that liver is doing a little bit other body functions and keeping them nice and healthy and processing any toxins in the body. Right here is a little dark, but right here between my tweezers, this portion here, and I'm off screen, this portion here is actually the heart of our perch. So the heart of a fish is right up by the gills. Their heart's in their throat. And that is, again, pumping the blood throughout the body, keeping all these organs functioning, keeping this fish functioning and healthy throughout its life. Underneath the digestive system, and I'm going to pull this, put this down here just for a second. If I can get the digestive system out of here, we can see something that we had been talking about if you had joined us on Tuesday. See if I can get the digestive system out here. So one more incision.
Okay, so down here, which I've actually cut into the digestive system when I pulled it off, it broke right into it. But this cavity down at the bottom is the swim bladder for our perch. So this perch is using that swim bladder to help it regulate where it is in the water column. Um, Perch, I believe, if my memory serves, are physoclistus, meaning that their swim bladder is not connected to their digestive system. It's actually connected to their circulation system, and then they're pulling oxygen out of their blood, or not oxygen, they're pulling gases like carbon dioxide and nitrogen out of their blood and putting that into their swim bladder. Again, serving as like that balloon in their body so they can regulate where they are, either towards the bottom of the water or towards the top. Also looking in this fish, you can see its muscle patterns. If I angle it a little bit here, you can see the muscle patterns along the side of its body cavity, and a little bit with the ribs. So there's some ribs there that you can see right through. If I turn our fish over, my finger goes to about here in its body. So the body cavity makes up this bottom portion. And then from here up is actually a lot more muscle. So that's a really strong muscle that's helping this fish move throughout the water. And then the spine would be right about in here, between the body cavity and then this portion of muscle on its back. So the fish has a nice strong back to help it move throughout the water, and do all the processes that we've mentioned at the beginning. Let's see, is there anything more? I do have one more incision that we could do. This one tends to be a little bit harder, so bear with me. But what I'm going to try to do is actually pull the lens out of the eye. So if you are squeamish at all, you may not want to look at this portion, but the lens itself is definitely worth it, and a really, really interesting thing to see, and how it compares to the lenses that we have that help us see. I've got a little extra help with glasses as additional lenses to help me see, but we can take a look at this fish's lenses in its eye. So let's see if I can get to that. Just have to go right through the cornea here, the layer on the top of the fish's eye. Find that lens. There we go. I'll put that on the back of my hand. So that little ball there, it looks like a tiny little bead. That is the lens of the fish. So the fish's lens in its eye that helps it focus on what it's seeing around it, is actually an orb. It's a sphere. And it's able to move that lens forward and backwards in its eye, so it can focus again on its food or whatever it's seeing around its environment. And then it can relay that information to and connect it to the other senses that it's getting from its lateral line and various other feelings around the water around it, so that it can make a decision on whether what it's feeling is food, prey for it to find and eat, or maybe it's feeling a predator and it should either hide or get out of there. So I want to thank you all for coming along with this fish dissection. I'm going to hop over to the other screen, answer some questions, and give you your challenge for the week. But thanks again for sticking with me. And here we go, quick transition. Cool, so back with me, I'm Michael, and I'll see, I'm gonna share my screen just for a second so we can finish up this, and then I'll go right into your questions. You've been very patient. Thank you for sticking around with that. So we're just looking at the yellow perch, a little bit about how they're able to survive here in the Adirondacks and throughout North America. If you want far more fish anatomy then you probably need to know. I have a great diagram that we posted on our website where you can look at all of those other components. We mostly focused on these portions here in the cavity of the fish, the body cavity of the fish. We took a look at the lens of the eye. We took a look at its gill arches and gill rakers, or maybe vestigial gill rakers on our fish. And then we talked a little bit about this upper portion where you'd find a lot of the muscles and ways that this fish is going to move around throughout its environment. To try this at home, we've got a reflection form right on our webpage at wildcenter.org/digital learning, where you can reflect on what you just saw and how it compares or contrasts to human anatomy. I've got a wonderful crossword created by the New York State DEC, where you can think about some of the vocabulary that we went over and check that out and have some fun with it. And then tune in next week for some more fun with science. We'll be here Tuesdays and Thursdays at 11, looking at different natural history, art science, engineering challenges for the Adirondacks. And you can always reach out to us at digitallearning@wildcenter.org. If you do any of the archived videos, so I have now 3 videos up from the past week, and this will be up shortly if you want to revisit it and review. But all of those videos are available. All the resources are available on our website at Digital Learning. And if you do some of these challenges, send me pictures of those engineering solutions that you come up with and your posters and such that you create, and we'll share those out. So with that said, we're going to move over to questions and see. We have 26 questions here. Let's see what I can answer for you. Ooh, I have a question from Miguel about why do I like yellow perch the best? I joke around. I have favorites of everything. I have favorite invertebrates. I have a favorite, if I had to pick fish, I have a favorite bony fish, and I have a favorite cartilaginous fish, and probably a favorite bony ocean fish and a favorite bony freshwater fish. I think that just the fact that I remember perch from when I was so young, just that memory, and the distinct nature of its orange fins and that camouflage pattern on its back, just make it a really, really compelling fish. They are really, really quite interesting and are found in such a broad range that they're one that we typically would come across as you go out fishing. And then I have a question from Aiden asking, did you find this fish in the Adirondacks? Yes, this individual fish was caught by one of my coworkers ice fishing a couple of weeks ago, or probably a month ago at this point. And he did catch them at a lake in the Adirondacks. I forget which one. He may not have wanted to share his fishing spot. But this is an Adirondack caught yellow perch. Ooh, Maya's asked, why do the fins have different names? Scientists always like to label things. And since each fin in each pair of fins tends to have a different task that it's doing for the fish, they have given them different names so that they can identify. So when you're identifying different species of fish, I was mentioning with the perch, they've got very distinct set of dorsal fins. So I have that perch with me. I'm going to spotlight the video back to the perch so you can see, remember these dorsal fins. So we have the one dorsal fin at the front. We have the one dorsal fin at the back. We think about a fish like this one here with our little stuffed animal sturgeon. They have a dorsal fin, but it's way at the back. And the location of these fins and being able to communicate clearly what fin you're talking about is really, really important as a scientist. This stuffed animal here too also has, you can see the pectoral fins right about where my finger is here, and the pelvic fin where my other finger is there. You can see they're in different locations and with the perch as well. The perch had its pectoral fins up by its operculum, up on the side of its body, and its pelvic fins are actually about where the pectoral fins are on the sturgeon. So locations of fins can tell us a lot about the kind of fish we're looking at and how it's surviving in its environment. Let's spotlight back to me. So many more questions. What is it called when a yellow perch has the stripes? I'm not familiar with what juvenile perch look like, so young perch look like. But the stripes on the back of this perch may be something that comes with age. So a juvenile perch would be nice and small. It may not need the same camouflage pattern to survive in its environment. And then as they get older, they get that nice vivid camouflage pattern.
or banding, I guess would be the closest term that I can remember for it, or the closest vocabulary for it, that would allow them to hide a little bit better. We have a question from Helena. Are fish cold or warm in water? So perch tend to be found, they're here in the winter, they're here in the summer. They can live in different temperatures of water and tend to have a little bit more of a range. Fish like brook trout need a very specific temperature. So they're found usually in deeper water where it's colder to begin with, and need nice and cold water. So they're what we call it, brook trout, or what we'd call an indicator species. I had a picture of a brook trout around. We may have to wait for a future digital drop-in learning to talk a little bit more about brook trout in particular. Oh, that is a great question. These are all great questions. But Lucy has a really good question. Can fish see in the water like humans can see in the air? So if any of you have gone and jumped into water, you'll notice that you can see through the air. But once you're underwater, everything gets really blurry. Our eyes aren't evolved to seeing underwater. So I can't necessarily say how a fish sees underwater. I can't remember, but I would assume that a fish could see clearly underwater since their eyes are adapted to being there. And if they were to poke their head out of the water, so if you think about like a movie like Finding Nemo, again, those are cartoon fish, but if they're poking their head out of the water, looking around, they may not, it may be blurry, and they may not be able to see as far since it's not what they're typically evolved or what they typically would see under. I have a question about what is the bump on the bottom of the fish. So fish will sometimes have, just since there's more organs in the bottom of their body, they tend to have the rounded portion underneath. This perch here, I'm gonna move the question box over. This perch here, if I can spotlight the video again. This perch here has a little bit up of a part where the body bumps out down here. And again, that's just because this is where a bunch of the fish's organs are. The fish overall is kind of a torpedo shape. So it's pointed at the end and pointed at the other end and kind of round and tube shaped in the middle. That's called fusiform. It's a really good vocabulary word to talk about fish. Fusiform is essentially that football shape so that it's able to cut through the water. So this fish is swimming that way. It's nice and pointed at the front, nice and pointed at the back, so the water can go around it and it can move through quickly and be nice and hydrodynamic. There are other species of fish. If you think about pumpkin seed, they are still, their body shape is still like this. So they're pointed at one end and a little bit wider in the middle where they've got all their body functions, and they'll point it at the other end. But they look more like a disc. So they're going to be deeper down below, higher up above, and more like a disc shape, but still with the bumped out portion in the middle where all their body parts are, and then a little thinner at the tail and a little thinner at the head. Here we go. We have a question about how hard is it to cut into the fish. With the cuts that I did not cut into the head. That's something that could be done if you wanted to look at something called otoliths. So fish have bones in their ears that scientists often will use to tell the age of the fish. They have rings just like trees have rings as they grow. But for the purposes I have right now, I just have scissors that I was able to bring home with me. I didn't go ahead and cut into the skull of the fish. But the hardest portion to cut with the fish is right through, from the cuts that I did. Let me hop it back over to the fish here. The hardest portion is right actually through where these pelvic fins are. There's a bone here where the pelvic fins are, so they have that strong structure that they can use when they're moving them around. So the rest of it was just nice soft material, and then I cut through there, and I actually cut through a little section of bone, and then it was more soft material again. So that would have been the hardest part for the dissection today. We have a question about, can you see any bones? So the bones are all covered on our fish.
I'm gonna hop it back over to the fish again. Apologize for the image hopping here. But you may be able to see, can you kind of see there's a little bit of a pattern there. If you look right along this portion, oh, my hand's in the way. So right along the bottom section here in the muscles, you kind of see a little bit of a pattern and a little part where it's pointing out. Those are really thin bones. Those are the ribs, and you can feel them right along this section here in the bottom portion of the fish. So those ribs will provide structure around the section of the body with all those organs and provide some safety for them. Question about why is the heart in the throat? So we had mentioned that the heart was right about up in here in the fish's body. If I can turn it, kind of see that it's going to be the darker spot between my fingers. And that is there because it's right next to the gills. So this fish is pushing all that oxygen that it's picking up out of the water through its gills. It's pushing that by its heart throughout the rest of its body. So they have their gills and their heart very, very close to each other. And that's why we find the heart up towards its throat there. So for this species of fish, for perch, they're just going to have gills to get oxygen out of the water. Some species of fish, like lungfish, coelacanths, one of my favorite species of ocean fish, will have lungs in their body as well. So in addition to having gills and breathing underwater, they have lungs in those specific species. But for our perch, they don't have any lungs. That's one of the key differences between many species of fish and mammals like humans. We have lungs to breathe air. They have gills to breathe underwater, and that's a really cool example of comparative anatomy. How long can fish survive underwater? It depends on the species of fish, how long they live. Some species live for tens to hundreds, maybe not hundreds, but over 100 years. Perch tend to live 8 to 10 years is a nice old perch. It was reading something that was talking about how, depending on where you're finding the perch, if you're finding them in colder places in northern latitudes towards the Arctic, they tend to grow a little bit more slowly and live a little bit longer than perch that you'd find in southern portions of its range, where they can grow more quickly and may not live quite as long. We have, bear with me, I'm going through some of these questions. So today, Isaiah's asked if I was able to dissect the brain. Today, I just don't have the tools necessary to cut into the skull, so I won't be dissecting into the brain, and it's often hard to locate. Since the skull is so hard, it's harder to cut through that and then to keep the brain of the fish intact. We have a question about teeth of perch. Do they have teeth and are they sharp? So perch would have just very little teeth in their body, and they just kind of feel like little almost sandpaper. So we'll see if I can get to that. So that's not there at all. Right there, right along its jaw, you may be able to see a slight bumpiness to it. So those are what would be the teeth, the texture part of the jaw that it could use to hold its food into its mouth. Fish back down. We have a question from Cody. Doesn't it use its swim bladder to stay afloat without sinking? Yeah, so the swim bladder, it can pump gases into that so that it can regulate where it is or control where it is in the water. So a fish, if you would envision the area around me as water, and then this is a fish, if it has pulled gases from its blood into its swim bladder, it's going to help the fish rise towards the surface and maybe swim around up here, find some food if it's looking for insects at the surface. And then if it wants to hide and stay away from predators, it can use a little bit about the counter shading, the light belly and dark back. But it also could extract or pull some of those gases from its swim bladder and allow it to sink down towards the bottom.
We have a question about how the lenses in its eye move. There'd be little muscles in its eye that could help them move or flex it. So our lenses will flex and change shape a little bit to help us focus. Or if you're like me, you have glasses that a technology design that helps me see beyond about my hand. And with fish, it would just change a little bit about where that lens is in the eye to help it focus. I have a question from Eden. Will I do this again with another fish? If people are interested and like these dissections and other programs, I'm happy to do a dissection with another fish in the future. I have more perch for science in my freezer that I'd be happy to pull out in the future to do this again if people are interested in that. Does the fish need its front fin? So with that, are we talking about possibly its pectoral fins? So not all fish have all fins. No, that didn't work. I'm trying to spotlight the video. Here we go. Seem to have lagged a little bit. So bear with me with slight technical difficulties. So it looks like I lost mobile science there for a second. If you can see mobile science, go ahead and raise your hand. We see mobile science, see the fish? Because I'm at home, I'm at the whim of my home internet. So I apologize if that cut out for a second. So I just have to get the gyroscope of my camera engaged here and turn it on its side. You're going on a little bit of a field trip throughout the room here. Cool. That should bring us back to our fish. Looks like it's still on its side. I forgot what the question was. I'm so sorry with all the distractions from technology not working out. But typically fish, I think we were talking about fins. Fish will have these pelvic fins since they rely on them so heavily for adjusting how they're moving through the water. But they may not have dorsal fins or not have other types of fins. So I'll do two, probably maybe 5 more questions. I have a lot to get through. But I want to make sure you all can get over to our lunchtime live video, which will be starting in about 10 minutes on Facebook. And then this video and lunchtime live will be available on our website, wildcenter.org/digital later today. I have questions about what's interesting about yellow perch from Anna. What's not interesting about yellow perch? They have so many cool aspects about them. They are a very popular sport fish, one because of their coloration, one because of their taste. They tend to school, so they live in big groups that can get up to 50 to 200 fish, depending on where they are. And doesn't seem that fast, but they tend to top out around 6 miles an hour. So they're not the fastest fish, but they have a lot of different adaptations on their body for camouflage that help them survive throughout aquatic ecosystems in the Adirondacks and around the world, well, around North America. I have a question for me about what education program helped me get ready for my job at the Wild Center. So I have a degree in geology. I was the student in high school that never wanted to do dissections. I wanted to go into botany, so I didn't have to do dissections with animals. And then I studied rocks so I could dissect rock layers and see how the earth works together to learn more about it. But then ended up, when I was working at a different nonprofit, I ended up being able to take biology of fishes. And I feel like, at least for me, I joke around saying I studied geology because I couldn't pick what part of the planet I wanted to study. But when I learned more about a specific animal or organism, there's just so much to know. And as you learn more, I feel like it just feeds that curiosity. So fish weren't an animal I was all that interested in before, but I took biology of fishes, and there's just such a range to them. There's so many different facts about them that make them such compelling animals to study, which is the same for so many other animals and plants and organisms.
I'll do 3 more questions. I want to make sure people can move on if they need to. So Brody has asked, what's a predator of yellow perch? Pretty much any other fish bigger than it, including other yellow perch. But you could have larger yellow perch eat them. You could have walleye, various species of bass, pike, muskies will all eat perch. Even sunfish that are large enough will eat yellow perch. And humans. They tend to be a pretty big fish for us to catch and eat. Oh, we have a question about my favorite fish overall. I will just tell you the names and then I'll have you go research them because they're super cool. My favorite bony ocean dwelling fish is the bluefin tuna. And now that you got me started talking about it, I'm just going to tell you part of why. Because they're kind of endothermic. They can kind of heat their body based on their muscles generating heat. And then my favorite cartilaginous fish, like a shark, would be the epaulette shark. Epaulette, like in shoulder pads, shark, because they walk on their fins and it's amazing. We'll do one more question. There's one more question about what do perch eat? So perch tend to eat, if they're big enough, other perch, but for the most part, they're eating aquatic invertebrates. So things like insects, crayfish, plankton when they're really, really young, and other organisms like that. So thank you all for sticking around. We still have 20 attendees, almost an hour into this. Thank you for sticking with me and learning a little bit about perch. Definitely check out the challenges on our website, try some of those activities. I think they're super fun. I hope you think they're fun as well. Join in for Lunchtime Live at noon on Mondays through Fridays. And then I'll see you all here back here next week for 2 more digital drop-ins, Tuesday and Thursday at 11 a.m. Welcome to send questions to digitallearning@wildcenter.org. Yeah, digitallearning@wildcenter.org is our website. Send questions, send pictures of your projects. We'd love to continue contact with the awesome education community that's joining in these programs. Thanks again, and have a great afternoon, everybody.